everyone, it's Finn here with John and Derek from the SDGC here with the first part of our Final Fantasy XVI review. And we say first part because this is a meaty game. And so we're about, according to the PlayStation's like tracker, we're all roughly in the 40 to 60% range of the game. So I feel like that's a solid place to start a first impressions.
Yeah.
You know, like how do we feel about the game roughly halfway in? And then we can see how our thoughts have changed after we're done.
This is a review
welcome, gentlemen.
in progress. We are going to talk about the first major chunk of the game, which is the stuff that's all been heavily, in the marketing and in the PR. I think we've all made it past a major turning point where pretty much everything here is stuff that nobody's seen in a trailer or a promo still. But despite all of that, we're going to keep it very light on story details.
Correct.
Maybe some setting stuff but we're not going to tell plot details because part of coming into something like a Final Fantasy is I'm going to have to deal with barking dogs, and I am so
fine.
sorry.
You're good.
That's the SDGC existence, huh?
But Derek, you're entirely correct. Part of this game is experiencing the story, and having too much expectations or knowing what's coming does the story a disservice. So we will do our best to give you our vibe check on Final Fantasy XVI without ruining those moments for you.
Yeah, and then I think potentially when we get to the full review after the game is over, we might be a little bit more open about some of the plot stuff from early in the game.
Yeah, I think at that point we can.
It'll be hard not to at least talk about
spoilers.
stuff from the first few hours once we're at full review stage. But even here, I want to assume people may not have even played the demo.
Correct. So also, I want to just start off by saying I thought it was very interesting that they pulled a Metal Gear Solid and actually killed Clive off in the first hour.
I know, it's wild.
Replacing him with Raiden. I thought that was a bold choice.
It's really, really cool. It's
they mentioned that Platinum Games helped out, but they forgot to mention Kojima helped out. It was crazy.
I actually could not believe it when a certain event happened and the Final Fantasy XVI logo came up and then was wiped away and replaced with Chrono Break. It was
so crazy.
Such an incredible moment. Like,
so
finally.
All jokes aside, thank you to Square Enix for providing us a review code.
Correct.
So keep that in mind. We did receive a review code for the game.
Also, just in case it hasn't been stated, full disclosure, we did attend the Final Fantasy 16 pre-launch party in LA by invitation.
Sure did.
So want to be full disclosure with that.
And also full disclosure, we're best friends with the voice of Clive. And
I thought you were going to say Jesus. I thought you were going to say we're best friends with benefits, and I was like, no, we're not.
I mean, also that. But no, okay. So the structure is we're going to talk about the plot. And that way, if you don't even want to risk anything, you can skip straight to our discussion of gameplay. And then we're going to talk about things that we would like to see either tweaked or improved upon in future installments. More or less like what we're not feeling at the moment. So let's just jump right in, guys. Final Fantasy 16, the first 20 to 25, 30 hours. How are we feeling?
I am in love with this game.
I love this game so much. As somebody who has a lot of criticisms, right? Like, I'm still greatly enjoying my time with the game. One thing I do want to put up front, because I think a lot of folks who may be casually looking at like review blurbs on Twitter and such might be walking into this with a higher expectation that this is like Game of Thrones, the game with a Final Fantasy coat of paint.
Not.
It's so much the other way around. I think that this feels very much like a Final Fantasy story so far. It feels like a Final Fantasy cast. There is warmth and there is earnestness there that I never saw in something like Game of Thrones.
I think the closest thing would say it's much closer to Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yes.
In terms of tone
or like
and plot.
12. Again, I find a lot of 12 DNA in there.
But the Game of Thrones comparison is an easy one to make just because for the casual person, the layman, it immediately sets in mind the setting and the tone.
Yeah.
And for this game, the not high fantasy, but like the more grounded reality setting and the tone of the game, I think it's not a incorrect statement to make.
I don't even think it's really that grounded because it's a pretty high fantasy world.
It is. It absolutely is.
It's just that it is.
For some reason, in my mind,
visually
high fantasy means you have all the other races and stuff, but we don't really have that in this game. So
but we've got dragons and bombs and
there's a Moogle.
Yeah, but like it is a bit of a more grounded aesthetic, right? Everything is, all the costumes are fancier than something you'd see in Game of Thrones, but they're made of leather and chainmail and so on. It's meant to look more grounded, but it's undeniably high fantasy. I do think that like the Ivalice games and settings is probably the closest comparison.
Yes.
That's where I like using 12 because like tactics is probably closer in a lot of ways in terms of the tone and weight, but there are these moments of warmth that come through from characters in certain moments. There's these moments of, I don't want to say levity because then people think of like Marvel quippiness and it's not that, but there's these moments of warmth that make me think of like FF12, which found time to have those moments even in heavy political, storytelling.
Well, which is one reason I have found all the online discourse about this isn't a Final Fantasy game to be so goofy, because
it clearly is.
It's very, very much a Final Fantasy game. But
that's how you know it is a Final Fantasy game, because only a new mainline Final Fantasy game kickstarts the conversation of what's a real Final Fantasy
that's true,
game.
Right?
That's
a good
excellent point. I got to tell you, I am about maybe 40% of my way through the story, and I want to point out that I'm like 35 hours in. This is one of the longer Final Fantasy games. Right off the bat, if this maintains the pace for me, if this game continues on as strong as it has for me and sticks the landing, this is going to be up there with Final Fantasy VI as my favorite Final Fantasy.
I already envision it kicking off. Like for me, my top 3 have pretty reliably remained 6, 9, and Tactics, with 4 coming in at number 3 if Tactics isn't counted.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine 15 not, if it keeps up the pace it's at where we are and beyond, I don't see it not touching top 3 for me.
Like this game is special.
So in terms of plot, let's who have you guys really resonated with so far outside of Sid? Because I think we can all agree that Sidelphus is
the entire internet
the greatest Sid of Final Fantasy so far.
I actually texted that to Derek today. I was like, Derek, this is the best Sid in the franchise.
Let's say
right?
the basic setup. I mean, God, I assume people know the basics coming to this review, but in the event that you don't, this is set in a new world where you don't have to have played any other Final Fantasy thing to get into this, and we are dealing with a lot of the political tensions and maneuverings between various countries as this blight is beginning to spread across the land and, kill off the land and kill off all the animals and creating just uninhabitable wasteland. And at the center of all that are people who are known as dominants, which are various people who basically contain, are linked with, what have you.
Oh, can I make it a little nerdier for you, Derek?
Do it.
Okay, dominants are basically the Jinchuriki from Naruto. They have a tailed beast inside them, but instead of having the 9 tails demon fox inside of Naruto, you have one of the classic Final Fantasy summons inside of them. And just like in Naruto, they can call it forth and use their power, but it comes at a steep cost to their own personal health.
I really and specifically hoped that like Naruto of all things would never come up in this review, and yet you did it.
I don't know what any of that means. All I know is if they're the dominants, does that make the icons the subs?
Shut up! I'm the only one who can make that joke.
Okay.
But anyways, that's basic setting stuff, and we play Clive Rossfield, who is a sort of like a prince of one of the kingdoms. Prince is not the correct term.
He's like a duke in waiting. Yeah, I don't really know what the hell
his
to call
father
it.
is the archduke, but he is not the one who is set to take the throne. But
Correct.
He is still royalty.
His father is a handsome archduke.
Yes.
Oh my God! Let's shout out to your boy. He is
a daddy in multiple ways of the sentence. And for those of you who've played the demo, you know the details, but some degree of tragedy unfolds and we cut forward to, a little bit further into Clive's life as things are falling apart more and the various dominants are coming together and I will say, I think a lot of us were worried early on that Clive was going to be like a plain protagonist,
Oh,
and
I
I'm
fucking
so
love this dude.
happy
Clive
that
is
he's
awesome.
nothing but. He's an incredible protagonist with a ton of personality, a ton of like self-agency. One of the great things about having a 30-year-old protagonist in an RPG like this is Clive, I feel like, goes through these intense moments of like self-doubt and self-pity, which is kind of standard for a lot of this stuff, but
Yeah.
he's able to talk through and rationalize his feelings in a way that's very refreshing.
And it never
Right.
comes off as overly whiny like it does in other JRPGs.
And
You
to
know
be
what I mean?
clear,
Like,
if
yeah.
it's teenagers, look, man, at 17, you're a little whiny, right? I was, y'all were. That's the name of the
Well,
game.
yeah, that's just how
but
it is.
Clive is 30, and
No, he's actually 32.
32. Okay, he's the exact same age as me, and he handles things and goes through like there is just a very realistic emotional depth to Clive that makes him feel like somebody who handles tragedy in a very realistic way that I quite appreciate.
Well, and he's also notably the oldest Final Fantasy protagonist we've had in the franchise thus
Only
far.
3 years younger than
Um,
grizzled days away from retirement Auron.
I know, yeah. And I'll be 43 in 2 months, so that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
But
You're
also-
basically Tella.
a
So-
lot of this is like, honestly, I feel like as well written as Clive is, he wouldn't like Ben Starr's performance is really what kind of brings
well,
it
no,
home.
let's just that's a good segue into just how incredible the entire voice cast of this game is. I have
Oh,
not come across
easily.
a single like miss.
There's not a single weak performance. Even characters
There's
who
really
I think are being underwritten as of the time where I am, the actual acting performances being given to these characters is incredible. Even characters who I think got done dirty, the performance is top notch.
So one thing I really like about this game is its use of a narrative device we don't really see in Final Fantasy games is the time skip. And that's not really a spoiler because the demo shows it right off the bat.
Right.
Is that we start as Clive is, I want to say, what, 17?
Closer to like the
he's like
usual
15.
Final
He's
Fantasy
15.
protagonist.
Yeah.
He's more at that time. He and his younger brother are more what you associate with your main characters in a Final Fantasy game. But then we skip forward after the events of the demo, and it's just I love that because there's something so good about a time skip in media because then filling in the gaps of what happened between those years is such a wonderful, like, you don't mind exposition or world building because you're like, oh, things were here and now they're there. How did we get there? And it's the way they dole out that information. And if I may,
Yeah.
after Derek talks, I have a segue into that, and it actually one of the main complaints people have with the gameplay of this, I actually have a rebuttal to.
Okay. Well, let's.
All right.
I was going to say first that I appreciate the way that the plot setup of the game allows us to do a time skip, but has a good way of keeping Clive in the dark of a lot of what has gone on in the world over that length of time.
Well, and it's
right?
also
not in a oh, he went into a coma, like, which
Right.
like the circumstances he is put under limit his access to the outside world in a way that allows us as players to have to be filled in with Clive on how things have evolved.
Well, and also it's so Final Fantasy 15 in its closing hours did the time skip also. It was like a time skip of 10 years. And this feels far more organic and necessary to the storyline than that particular time skip did. In fact, like in 15 Noctis came out pretty much the same, right? But in this, like, Clive went from, a young prince, for lack of a better term, to
That's
you know,
the easiest
being
way to put it.
right, like to being sullen and angry and bitter and justifiably so in all regards. And
Sullen
like
and bitter,
Clive's
but not,
attitude change like feels earned. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
sullen and bitter, but not misanthropic.
Yes.
Right?
Like,
And
it
I think
hasn't ruined his desire to do what's right and to help people despite the circumstances the time skip puts him in.
Clive is not an edgy anti-hero. Like, he
No.
is somebody who has ideals and beliefs. This is somebody who values human life, right? This is somebody who, like, a major part of the setting is that people who are born with the natural ability to use magic without needing to use crystals to do so are considered, you know, freaks of nature. They're branded and then called the branded, and they're treated as a permanent underclass in basically every nation. And that ranges from, you know, being more of a social underclass to being outright property in many countries. So, you know, like, but Clive comes from a perspective of not buying into that same, like, discrimination, you know, in a world where that is taken for granted.
Yeah. I really like, again, it's the way the world building is. It's they've, without having this heavy overbearing like exposition that again we associate with some of these JRPGs with their plot, they allow us to discover it through different ways. And the one of the ways I really love that they do this world building is through the side quests. Even the most banal like mediocre side quest of, hey, go here and pick a flower and bring it back to me.
Yeah.
Like, the gameplay might not be engaging in that regard, but the story that either revolves around that side quest or that you get in the conversation upon completion always fleshes out the world in a really fun, meaningful way. Like, Derek, you're not quite at this part yet, but one of the quests explains more about Jill and how she became a member of Rosalia.
Yes.
Like a citizen of Rosalia. And it came from just a very generic random side quest.
I am begging people not to skip the side quests, especially in the latter half of the game.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's really cool because, and none of it's like necessary to the core plot. Not doing the side quest won't make you not understand the story that you're progressing through. All it does is flesh out the world and make it feel more lived in. And I really appreciate that about the way they did this story.
Yeah, some of the early side quests might be a little like, go get that wood for me out of the pile. But the thing is, like, the further in you go, so many of them are, I mean, I think very important for helping flesh out, like, the attitudes of the world and help place, you know, like, it shouldn't be skipped, right? It's not all fetch quest bullshit. You can't always be sure. You know, I mean, obviously, coming from somebody who doesn't like big open world games, which this is not, but like somebody who needs to not interact with all optional content or else I get burnt out, I'm still going to say you should be interfacing with this content.
Yes. I will endorse that 100%. One of my favorite things about the story so far is story's the wrong word. One of my favorite things about the narrative so far is the little surprises that you find in these, like Finn said, these at first glance little, you know, mundane side quests. You know, like, go get me a spool of cloth from the merchant, and all of a sudden you are learning more about the tragic backstory of a character that you've come to love over the past 20 hours. It's very unexpected, but also very welcome. As for the actual narrative itself, I
sure am curious. I'll say this: I don't know if I'm gonna like where they're going or not. I can't be sure, but they've got me. I've got to know.
I like it so far. I like the narrative so far, and we're also at that point, all of us, where you're like, okay, there's that Final Fantasy shit right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
I sure do.
Yep.
And it's a great moment when that pops up.
Right now, so like, Finn, did we want to keep talking about story? Did we want to move on to gameplay?
I
was
it's
actually
hard
just
to
going to
say much about story.
I want
to
end it with saying, I don't think any of us actually answered my question. We all immediately talked about the voices and how much we love Sid. Who's your favorite character not called Sid?
I mean,
because I'm going to go first, and it's my fucking boy Gav.
Gav is great.
Is amazing. I love his blossoming bromance with Clive. and I just love his voice actor and his mannerisms. And there's a part later where he just stops and goes like, something incredible happens right next to me. He just goes, well, fuck me.
Yeah.
It's so good. I love Gav. Gav is my favorite side character at the moment by far.
Gav is great. I think it's hard because like Gav is great. I really, really enjoyed Benedicta up to a certain point. Which I'll hold on to that for later, put a pin there. I think right now it's Clive. I am expecting, based on what people have told me, to switch to Team Dion by the time this is over with. But
You 100% will.
but I don't know that for sure. So
For me, I'm gonna be real. It's Torgal.
Torgal's a
Everyone
good
loves
boy.
Torgal's a good boy.
I cannot.
Torgal only becomes a better boy later.
I cannot. Yes, he does, Finn. I cannot imagine this game without Torgal now.
No.
There is something so satisfying about stopping in the middle of the overworld or a town or wherever you're at and just giving him a treat, giving him some pats, and you can do it literally whenever you want.
He's just a
Whenever
good
you
boy.
want.
He's just a good boy.
That to me, like there's something so comforting and familiar about it, because I've got 3 dogs. I love my dogs, and I want a good boy to accompany the protagonist in every single Final Fantasy game going forward. Now, we need more Torgals.
Yes.
Torgal's pretty good.
But aside from that, honestly, like my favorite character right now is Clive or Dion.
Okay.
I gotta go with Clive or Dion. I waffle back and forth on those two constantly, and I cannot wait, Derek, for example, for people to get to know Dion better as you progress further in the game.
It's hard because you see almost none of Dion in the early chunk of the game that's
true.
Everyone is most people are currently in, and that has been heavily advertised.
That is going to change, my friend, very soon.
So not even I know much about Dion at the moment, but even his initial appearance is dope. So let's move on to the second core part of Final Fantasy 16, because Final Fantasy 16 can be distilled into 2 moments. It's the amazing story and the absolutely batshit incredible combat.
Oh my God,
by Mr. Devil May Cry himself. It's I mean, this is probably the most contentious point with some quote unquote fans in their claim that this is not a Final Fantasy game. But you know what? To those people, I say, just learn to enjoy something that's super fucking fun.
Shut the fuck up is what I say.
The combat. All right. So to break down the basic gist of the combat, you have the summons, the icons as they're called, and each icon that you attune with has a certain amount of abilities that you can pair to 2 of the face buttons, and then you can swap between up to 3 of them at a time. And eventually, once you max out the abilities, you can actually mix and match the abilities per icon and create a completely customizable battle set for yourself. But I love this system because between the real-time combat and the abilities you have, you can 100% craft your playstyle to your style.
This is just an extremely good character action game in the vein of Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, with action RPG elements layered more heavily on top of that. And I mean, obviously there's been a lot of annoying conversation about, okay, well, is that Final Fantasy? And like, I don't know if y'all remember Final Fantasy VII Remake, like not that long ago.
Yeah, come on.
As much an action game as anything else, but also who cares? It's a very good game with a very good combat system, right?
It is. Yeah. And I've heard a lot of talk about, all the RPG elements are tacked on. It's like, okay, like define RPG elements for me. Does it have a leveling system? Yes. Does it have an ability/magic system? Yes. Are there items like potions and high potions? Yes.
This stuff's very tiring because RPG elements have made their way into so many aspects of like so many different video game genres at this point.
Like look at what they did to Assassin's Creed, for example, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about
made it better,
the RPG elements are tacked on. Like I don't agree with that. Like you could say the RPG elements are lighter than something you might find in one of the older Final Fantasy games, but honestly, they don't seem
Yeah.
any greater or less than most Final Fantasy games I've played. I've played,
but
all
like
of them.
also anybody coming into this knew from the get-go that this was not going to be Final Fantasy X. You know what I mean? This was not
Right.
going to be turn-based and menu-driven. This is an action game. This is a character action RPG. And semantic arguments over what specific words to call this like micro subgenre are meaningless to me in the face of like, is this a good game to play? It's a blast. It is it is a game that does not require you to sit and grind, so the actual progression feels properly paced to the story. God, this is good. This is good.
So the gameplay itself, though, of the 3 icons so far, what's your favorite overall? What's your favorite ability, and what's your favorite circle ability?
So actually,
we might have to be quiet about which the third is, so maybe refer to that in abstract if you're going to talk about it.
I mean, I don't think so, because the attunement has nothing to do with anything else.
Well,
but
Finn,
now that you framed it like that, I don't
Finn,
know.
if you think about it, it's 4 icons. There are 2 icons of fire.
That is true.
Well, yeah, but it's okay. Well, I will say that
We'll say, all right, light spoilers of the icons.
which icons you get in what order, we'll get the first
The
3,
order, sure, yeah.
I would say my favorite is probably still Phoenix, because that phase shift is so useful.
Oh, it's so good.
But there is something to say for Garuda's actual special attacks, like that gouge special attack. That's just the multi-hit claw attack is so useful for raking up that percentage during a stagger.
Yes.
I
It's,
like.
go, John.
Oh no! Go ahead, Finn.
No, I was just commenting on what Derek said, but you go. Your turn.
I was just gonna say I'm like Derek. Like I love Phoenix Shift is a staple. I am a big fan of Ifrit's ignition ability.
Oh yeah.
Which one is
Juicy.
that?
That's the
Did-
tackle.
That's that classic Ifrit charge.
I haven't unlocked it yet.
Oh,
I have 15,000 unused ability
Finn,
points.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
I
Finn?
don't know.
You're decision locked.
Yes.
Finn.
It happens every time. I'm
Finn.
like, I'm going to wait till I have everything and then decide what I
Okay,
want to spend
Finn,
on. I have
Finn.
not unlocked anything.
Finn,
Unlock
are you gonna play it
ignition.
tonight?
Yeah, I've been playing all day.
Okay, go unlock ignition as soon as we're done here. It's
Very good.
it's damn near overpowered, Derek. Am I right?
It's really fucking good.
What about the remix to Ignition? I heard that's pretty good.
Anyway,
Yeah, combat's so fucking good, and it's only gonna get better as more icons get unlocked and more tools get into your arsenal.
I can't even imagine how deep the combat's gonna.
This
get.
is gonna hit Devil May Cry 3 levels of insanity by the time all's said and done.
Like I am so in love with the combat here. Like I'm going to say something that's going to be super controversial for a lot of people. But this is my favorite franchise in the world. No other gaming franchise means as much to me as Final Fantasy does. I would be fine if this was the direction the franchise went going forward. The combat
You could
that
have said
good.
far more controversial things right there. But
What,
I
Derek?
don't want to
Given
lose.
given the state of discourse about this game right now,
I don't want to lose like traditional menu-driven RPGs, and I would love the numbered entries to come back to that at some point. But Final Fantasy is a franchise that constantly reinvents itself, and what it is right now is very good, and I want them to make more that are like this. I just also want to see something that keeps the menus and keeps my old school experience.
Yes, so I'll answer, and then we can use that as a way to segue into the next part.
Yes.
Which is things we would like to see tweaked or issues we might currently have, that kind of thing. But my personal favorite right now is, like you guys, Phoenix, but with the caveat that while I love the dash, Garuda's grab I love even more because
It's the
it's
Nero
what takes
grab.
you aerial. It's what takes you aerial, and on bigger enemies, it does that like spin slash thing that gives you a like
lassos
vertical.
them.
Plus, it gives
well,
you a
that
stun
I
and
love
half
that, but
stagger.
also but also the way that you spin and jump higher and higher, and if you keep mashing that, you can get really high up, and then if you do the downward thrust, you get the it's called the extreme down, and the fire explosion and everything. Oh, I love that. It's such a cool combo. I'm a fan of anything that when I knock someone away with a magic burst at the end of a combo, it pulls them right back to me, so I
Yeah.
can continue to whip their fucking.
See, that's why I
ass.
like the phase tackle thing, because
Yeah,
then
the phase tackle one's great.
Then I
because
knock them
then you do
away
the-
and I just
Yeah.
boop to them, but it's the same thing.
and then you do that awesome like Punisher finisher move on them.
Yeah.
Love it.
The schmovement's good. The schmovement is very good.
This is like, the director of the combat, who again, like, as Finn stated, he's the guy who did Devil May Cry 5's combat. He stated that he considered this his masterpiece.
His
And I-
masterpiece.
I'd agree.
It shows.
And I can see
it
what he
shines.
means. I can absolutely see what he means.
Yeah.
I have never had more fun playing an action RPG than I have this game, and I'm not just saying that because
It's
I love the
easily
game
as
as
a,
much,
as a
like-
character like action game aficionado, this is one of my favorite combat systems I've played in any game ever.
You know
It's
what and you know
incredible.
what I love about that, Derek, is because you and I both love action games, and particularly Japanese made action games, like you said, Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But one of the worst parts about those games is that the story is always some terrible, nonsensical shenanigans with awful voice acting by and large, right? And so Final Fantasy
and
16,
like I love Platinum, but their games are clearly made on pretty tight budgets.
Right.
Versus 16 got the dump truck of money backed up onto it.
but it merges that level of gameplay excellence with finally the story and the structure and everything around it, the presentation and the polish that those games always suffer from.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is that whether we like this game or not, the reality is the RPG elements have been dialed back since previous Final Fantasy games. Whether that is a menu, like I'm not saying that everything needs the Final Fantasy VII remake slowdown to bring up the menu thing, even though I personally love that. But there's lots of things I think smaller tweaks that I think could fix that thought process. And one of the easiest ones to me is the shops. It really kind of sucks away the fun of entering a new area when all of the shops have everything Karen does back at the home base. Like going somewhere new never yields anything new to you.
I don't really have an
And-
issue with that.
I'm just saying, but that's such a small thing that old Final Fantasy games had that I think would be a very simple thing in a future installment to incorporate. You're progressing through the story. They keep saying, oh, shops will have new items as the story progresses, but they really rarely do, and they're never of anything of worth. But there was something fun about going to a new village or a new town and seeing what they had for sale. And I also feel like whenever you do equip something different, it doesn't ever feel like it has an impact on the gameplay. It's the same thing like other games of its style have, like God of War and Assassin's Creed and stuff like that, where the equipment doesn't feel like it adds anything new to the combat. I don't feel like if I ever equip a new sword, suddenly I'm actually performing better. It's just I'm getting good at the combat as a whole.
yeah.
Well, I mean,
You kind of need the stats to improve, because you got to keep it helps you to keep track with the like pacing of the game, but it's also very like you're going to have what you need to upgrade the equipment that you have or buy the new
Yeah.
thing, and that's going to be where you've got to be. You almost could have streamlined that stuff out of the game, but I think the process of doing that at the shop and the blacksmith feels like part of Final Fantasy, so people would feel weird if it wasn't there. It's maybe a no-win situation, but
I hear, I've seen a lot of talk about, oh, it would feel more like Final Fantasy. There's menus, stuff like that. I mean, there absolutely are menus. Like there's 2 menus. There's there's 3 actually. There's a menu for Torgal. There's a menu for your items. There's a menu for all your attacks. One of the really great things about Final Fantasy is the continual reinvention of the franchise over the years has continually reinvented itself and asked itself, what am I? Like I'm a Final Fantasy game. What does that mean? Right? Does
Yeah.
it mean it doesn't mean a turn-based battle system. Does it mean, there are chocobos? Does it mean there are Moogles? And honestly, like the answer is Final Fantasy is whatever it wants to be. And Final Fantasy is a franchise that is not shied away from making drastic changes to gameplay.
No, I don't think any of us are arguing that though. I'm just saying that I would like more RPG elements to come back into it. I think there is a way to take what we have with 16, reintroduce some more, I guess the word could be standard Final Fantasy RPG mechanics or whatever you want to refer to them as, and have that melding be an even better experience.
I mean, I guess all I'm saying is that if you did what Final Fantasy VII Remake did, and you just added a little button that says attack, you're still mashing buttons. Like, I feel like some of this stuff is like a placebo.
Yet a lot
effect,
of people love FF13, which is, very mash the auto battle button at times. It is like a lot of the game design is built to like both try to be the best game it can possibly be, but also sometimes give lip service to the stuff that people expect to be there, whether it works great or not, or is necessary or not. And like,
I think the reason I love the direction that Final Fantasy 16 has taken is because it has allowed the game to have a sense of scale and scope that, quite frankly, I wasn't even prepared for or expecting. No. There are moments in this game that are more God of War than God of War, and I'm talking from a just an epic scale.
Some real platinum games shit in this Final Fantasy, that's for sure.
It's so
right.
good.
And
like, John, I feel like you're taking what I say to imply that, unlike you, I don't like the direction it went.
Oh no,
That's
no, not at all.
I just saying if all things said and done, and a Final Fantasy 17 comes out, I think for me the perfect thing would be to take what 16 has given us and add on some more concise RPG mechanic. I don't know.
I think at this point, I trust like the people doing game design, like and combat design for this series have hit after hit after hit, right? Like it's been a pretty good run since 15. Like in terms of mainline games and spinoffs. And I don't like 15's combat much. Obviously, I've made that clear. I know other people do, but like since 15, they've nailed whatever they were going for in any particular project. So like I have hopes and belief in the gameplay of future Final Fantasies. I think where my concerns lie has more to do with writing. Like I don't want to be the fucking poopy pants social justice druid, but there's some stuff in this game that's working, and there's some stuff in this game that's very much not.
So you're being a poopy pants.
I am being a bit of a poopy pants, but somebody has to be. This stuff does matter. And like we've all talked about it. We all kind of see and feel, to varying degrees. I think in one regard, everybody was talking before the game came out. There was those really, really, inartful comments from Yoshi P about, well, there's somebody's asking about racial diversity in the game because everybody we'd seen appeared to be white, and it was like, well, yeah, we're going for like a European inspired dark Western fantasy, so we this is kind of the world we're creating. It's the usual bullshit. Why aren't there black people in The Witcher? Oh, because it's European inspired, and that sucks. And it's not entirely as true as those comments might make it seem. There is an entire major nation of the game that is Middle Eastern themed. It is, full of Middle Eastern people of some degree of inspiration.
Who are very clearly like not white.
Yeah. This
So,
is not,
like,
there's an entire non-white nation in the game that's not European inspired. And also to the point that you brought up, John, there's a lot of, folks and ethnic groups in the Middle East that are pale skinned.
Yep.
So, and they are not European, they are not Caucasian, they are not white. So that gets complicated. But it is true that everybody in the game passes the paper bag test, right? There's not a lot of melanin in the game, and that sucks. Like, I imagine that sucks if you're like a black or any darker skinned, player in the United States or anywhere else going like, hey, where are people who look like me? And it's not like an all white, that Yoshi P did not create a fucking KKK paradise for Final Fantasy 16.
Yes, that's
such an exaggeration. And that's so unfair to say, but like we can have accurate criticism, which is that, this is still a game that does not have any darker skinned people, and that cuts out a lot of people regardless of their ethnic background. The other thing, and this is something that I really didn't see as much criticism about until a little after launch, but like, I'm not feeling great about how this game has been with women so far. It's a couple of major women. Let me be clear, because you all pointed out correctly that a ton of the women that are secondary, tertiary characters filling up the world are great secondary, tertiary characters. But like, it sucks that one major evil woman is evil, sneevling, like conniving, like a lot of stereotypes about bad evil women. Benedicta is great up until what I feel like is almost character assassination towards the end of the story arc that she's involved in to what we've played so far. And then Jill comes along, and Jill hasn't had really anything to do but hang around and go, yes, I agree with that, Clive. Yes, let me help. And
so, and like we pointed out to you, because we are slightly
you all are further in than me. Yes,
that is that is an issue that you currently have that by the time we're talking about this again, you will not have again.
I'm at a point where I'm missing out on what you say is like some of the best side characters in the game who are all women. I have yet to meet. Jill has not opened up and come out of her shell as much yet, which is something I need. None of that to me will, and this is hard, right? Because like I've been talking to Britt, and Britt's devastated by how she feels kind of rug pulled on Benedicta. And I totally understand that. And it's probably not great if you can be as far into the game as I am and still feel this way. But I'm open-minded that the game will win me back in that angle. I'm not done. That's why we're going to do a full review at the end of the game. So, there's just stuff to work on, man. Final Fantasy is usually a series where I can point to and say, this series has so many great female characters. And, 16's not doing as bad as 15 because you can't do worse than 15. But, like, I just wish it was doing better.
Well, I'm just excited to see what you have to say again later.
Yeah,
me
we'll
too.
see.
Me too.
We'll see.
I'm
I'm
looking forward
open.
to it.
I'm keeping my mind open. That's why these are not definitive end of game thoughts. After
And,
all,
but it doesn't devalue your point, because we all make the joke where like, well, if you have to say get 20 hours in to enjoy something, then maybe it's not a good thing.
Right.
So but the way this game does the slow burn of its story, especially in the opening hours, all I'll say is, because this is such a lengthy story, by the time you're done, you'll have spent more time with it not being an issue than you ever had with it being an issue.
Yeah.
I guess is that.
well, and like,
But the Benedicta thing, I guess, but I don't.
it's hard to talk about without really spoiling some stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah,
this is not the
yeah.
place for that. But I know a lot of women who are really upset about Benedicta in particular. So that tells me that this is not just a couple of folks latching on to her. This is like a pretty cohesive problem. But like, the game has issues, right? But despite that, there is a lot to love. What this tells me is, my opinion so far is, this is something of a mixed bag game with some extremely high highs, right? Like some of the best combat I've played in a video game, some really best in class character work from, the characters that get attention. But then like some all too common problems of like Final Fantasy XVI is not uniquely bad at this. It is like many games where it really needed to have more people of color, more darker skinned people of color, and, do a little better by the main women of the plot so far. But, that's, you take the good with the bad, right? With something like this, it's interesting to recognize it for the totality of its messiness. Does that make sense?
So it does.
No, absolutely.
But we have already crossed the 45-minute mark, so let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Because our final review is going to be even meatier.
I'm fucking sure somehow.
And even more Quake. And even more... I'm just spelling...
You're trying.
Final
I
Fantasy
love you, bud.
spells now. Whatever. Anyway, because get it meatier and meatier sounds
God
similar.
damn it.
There you go. I knew Derek wasn't up on my level yet. So if you had, even though we don't even do review scores, what would you give this at your current state of the game?
John, why don't you...
Only based off what you've played.
Yeah, John, why don't you go first?
Like on a numbered scale?
I say we don't
in
normally
your
do that,
terms.
but
It doesn't have to be a
in
number.
your terms, like
9.5.
D-Dog.
I heartily recommend the game. I heartily recommend the game with the asterisk that like this is a game that has some stuff that I wanted to do better. As I said on Twitter, it's like I love Persona 4 and Persona 5. Both those games are so shitty to gay people. But like I love them anyway, you know? So I can love something without signing off on the stuff it needs to do better. So that's where I still heartily endorse the game, but like set your expectations accordingly. You're going to run into some stuff that makes you cringe.
Also, shout out to the photo mode.
I haven't even
For
fucked with the photo mode.
fucking-
I haven't even screwed around with that yet.
It's not the most robust, but it's there, and the game's so pretty that you don't need much else for it. Anyway, I'm going to, if I was going to give it an arbitrary numerical score, a 9.25 out of 10. I was about to joke and call it a 16 out of 10. But the point is, it's real fucking good, and I can't stop playing. Like,
Me too.
I'm seriously considering getting in trouble at work and calling out again tomorrow. Just being like, oh, I'm sick, man. But
I've got the
can't
black lung.
because they already know I took off for a game.
So you can't get
and
away with stretching that out.
If I show up again, and the worst part is, not the worst part. That's going to sound terrible. My parents are coming to visit for 4th of July weekend. So this weekend I can't play.
Yeah.
Like, unlike John's family visit, I'm actually excited about this one, but it does mean that is a very solid weekend that's now going to be gone from me to really, I probably could have beaten the game by next weekend.
I was going to say the worst thing is probably children with leukemia. So great to know you don't care
just leukemia
about children with
I would
leukemia.
Say, you know what? I don't
this
care
took a turn.
because I super care, Derek. I super care.
This took a really, really interesting turn.
John, I don't hear you talking about children with leukemia either. Don't you care?
Yes.
Anyway, love you guys. We'll see you
We'll hopefully
X amount of
be
time
here in a week or two. I mean, as soon as we can with that final review, but we want to make sure that we, at least a couple of us beat it before we do that. So
yes, we'll Michael Jackson it, and then we'll get back to you.
Cool. Awesome.
Because you said beat it. I don't know if you caught that one.
Yeah,
either.
we got it, Finn.
kindness.
All right, just making
costs
sure.
nothing.
All right, and
we'll catch you Thursday nights at 9
Kindness
p.m.
costs
Eastern
nothing,
time.
but Final Fantasy XVI costs $69.99 US dollars.
It.